has anyone here heard of a band called Skillet? It sounds awful, as far as I can tell. And that's appropriate because the lead singer of Skillet, I think, is going to be on Fox News talking to one of the Fox News hosts about the devastating problem in our country of wokeness and how we can, you know, finally take a stand against it and all that. So here we go. Let's take a look. Ready to combat the woke virus. I wish it was. Man. So you got like 12 people listening to this band. Bunch of American flags everywhere. It's like literally like a Fox News concert. I've never heard this song before, but it's terrible. You know, and this is not, I would be saying this if this dude totally agree with my politics, by the way. This is not like, oh man, I know this guy's, you know, a conservative right winger, so I'm going to be overly mean about his music. Like, I would feel the same way about this music, even if this dude was 100% in line with my values and politics. I would still think this is awful. So, you know, just putting that out there. And the proof of that is that there are singer-songwriters that are more, I guess, right-wing that I can appreciate some of the stuff they've done. Like, you know, I think Dave Mustaine of Megadeth is a lunatic, a crazy right-wing nut job idiot. But Megadeth fucking rocks. Johnny Cash, avowed Christian. A lot of his music is very, God-bothery. I'm an atheist and anti-theist, but I still can appreciate the music of Johnny Cash because it's soulful and it's genuine, it's authentic, it's true art. So, you know, don't think for a second that I'm berating this band for the sake of ideology. I'm berating them because this song is garbage.
It's a little bit of a...
Cool. Thank you for not showing too much of that. I'm glad that that's all I had to deal with as far as that goes. Every trash grunge band just be named Puddle of Mud. Yeah, they should just like every band that comes out that sounds like this, you just get named Puddle of Mud, followed by which order you emerged in terms of sounding exactly like Puddle of Mud. So these guys should be like, I don't know, Puddle of Mud part 742 or something. A lot of people have asked me, hey, where do you do your live streams? And the answer to that is that I do live streams called Abandon Hope every Sunday on the Pessimist Productions Patreon. That is linked down below. There is all sorts of other stuff on that Patreon as well. It is about $7 a month, and I think that we offer a pretty generous amount of content in exchange for that membership. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to check out the Patreon link in the description section of this video.
An abrupt turn, but it all makes sense in a matter of moments. Skillet's John Cooper is best known as the lead singer, bassist, and songwriter in the Christian band that you know as Skillet. But now he's taking...
So this is like a Christian rock band, too, on top of everything else. It's one of these Christian rock bands. By the way, there's even some Christian rock bands that I think have some good songs. You know, I'm not going to say that just like... I mean, obviously... most Christian rock is freaking terrible, but there are actually a few songs where I've like been like, yeah, this song kind of rocks, and then I find out later like, oh, this is actually a Christian rock band. It's like, oh, okay. But you know, actually another interesting thing is that a lot of these Christian rock bands have, you know, once they're done grifting, they come out and say like, I never believed in any of that, I just was doing it for money. So maybe this guy's one of those, but who knows? We'll see. We'll judge how genuine he seems, and we'll see what he's talking about.
Taking pen to paper in a new book to express his concern for his country. The
Good.
father of two, specifically targeting the woke agenda affecting our kids.
I've always wanted to read a book about the woke agenda written by a Christian rock star from a terrible band that I'd never listened to. It's going to really uplift me, I think.
See it across the country with the pro-Palestinian / Hamas protests.
I love how they can't possibly say pro-Palestinian without immediately being like, and Hamas. Like if you are against our country funding bombing campaigns that kill innocent civilians, including a shit ton of children, if you're against that, you must be pro-Hamas. Like, there cannot be any honest discourse on this subject, right? You know, it's basically either if you don't support Israel's campaign of annihilation of Palestine, then you must therefore support some radical Islamist agenda in the form of Hamas. And, you know, they're never going to drop that talking point. They're never going to be reasonable or fair about it. They're always going to associate the two things as if they're connected. By this logic, though, like what, 63% of Americans support Hamas because they support a ceasefire because they don't like seeing innocent civilians butchered. So that doesn't really make sense. I don't think 63% of Americans support Hamas. I think in some polls, a majority of Republicans support Hamas, but if not a majority, then a sizable number of Republicans support Hamas by this logic. The reality is that virtually no one in America supports Hamas, and conflating support for not bombing Palestine with support for Hamas as a terrorist organization is absurd.
You see that. Then we hear about it with Osama bin Laden's letter to America resonating really with this generation on TikTok, with influencers befuddled on how this could happen to their generation. They were all...
Here's how you guys painted yourself into a corner with this whole letter from bin Laden thing. Okay? Because you have taught people that everybody who is against us, everybody who does horrible things like terrorism or murder, we've all been taught and conditioned that these people who do these sorts of things are just comic book villains that are pure evil, completely unreasonable, and it's just not true. So the bar for Osama bin Laden was lowered to such a point that when people read this letter that he wrote to America and see that, like, wow, some of the stuff he said actually kind of makes sense, it's like they're flabbergasted. Oh my God, wow, he's not just a complete monster. I mean, he was a monster, but like most monsters, he had justifications, he had reasons, and occasionally he had points. Just like a lot of people have read the manifesto of the Unabomber and said, oh, wow, actually some of the stuff this guy said is pretty prescient, pretty interesting. Now, that doesn't diminish the fact that he murdered a bunch of people. Like, obviously, his bombing innocent people was still wrong. Obviously, Osama bin Laden orchestrating 9/11 was still wrong. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that, like, he's incapable of making any sort of good points. That being said, the scariest thing about this recent popularity of the Osama bin Laden letter is that he pretty much blames all of the social ills that have happened in the world on the Jews, because he's, of course, a raging anti-Semite. And unfortunately, right now, there's a lot of people out there who either they are using the fact that Palestinians are being murdered by Israelis to spread anti-Semitism, or they are naively conflating the policies of Israel with the religion of Judaism. Those two things, they can't be one for one sort of conflated with each other any more than, you know, supporting Palestinians should be, you know, conflated with supporting radical Islam. Like, I myself am a anti-theist. I believe that religion is a detriment to the entire human race. I believe that we would be better if no one was religious and no one made decisions based on faith. But that being said, I don't believe that people who are Islamic should be killed because that is insane, and that is against the sort of more secular humanist philosophy that I would be supportive of.
Couldn't believe it. But you know who could believe it? My next guest, the author of Wimpy, Weak, and Woke, John Cooper, seeks to stop.
Wait, the name of his book is Wimpy, Weak, and Woke? How Truth Can Save America from Utopian Destruction by John L. Cooper. All right.
Stop the madness.
Man, great. Love it.
John, when those two things happened, a lot of people were surprised. Not if they read your book.
Hey, Brian, good to see you again. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I'm sure the host of this Fox News show read this book in preparation for this guest that he has on for 3 minutes.
Absolutely. Look, I think the average American realizes things are not going good, but I don't know if people really understand why or how bad it's going to get. And so that's the reason I wrote the book. Here's how I would say it. If you piecemeal all of the bizarre things happening, college kids cheering on Hamas, young adults sort of sympathizing with Osama bin Laden, of all the insane things, but everything, woke military, drag queens coming in to read to children in schools. If you piecemeal all these things, they don't make sense. But if you understand that wokeness is a totalizing ideology, it is a way of seeing the entire world through a lens of power. Who has power and who did they steal it from? And whoever they stole it.
What are we talking about here? What's even going on?
From anything those people do is considered moral, and anybody that has power, anybody that has anything that someone else doesn't have, they are considered immoral. If you understand that.
I mean, if you understand that, you're a moron, because this is such a weird oversimplification of what anyone believes. No one goes around saying this stuff unless they're some sort of mental midget with the IQ of a fence post. This is not what woke ideology, quote unquote, is. It's not just grievance ideology based on, hey, if I'm treated even remotely a little bit unfairly, then the entire system must therefore be at fault for it. That being said, we can do, meta-analysis of multiple studies conducted by multiple academics over multiple, decades, and see that, there are biases in the system. There are unfairnesses built into the system. And, we can see that the rich have gotten richer, the poor have gotten poorer, and that's not all due to some sort of individual responsibility. It's not like the poors are poor because they just refuse to work, and the riches are rich because they're just, so much better and more hardworking and smarter than the rest of us. If you believe that, then you're an imbecile. So, it's not as simple as anybody who has more than anyone else must be cheating or unfair. But it's also not as simple as, everything is completely fair and, any sort of difference in results is all due to, superiority of this person over that person. Elon Musk is just so much better than the rest of us, and that's why he's rich. He's just so much smarter, so much better at business, so much better at understanding how to game the system and make the money. I mean, the reality is that, he was born a rich kid. He has gone from venture to venture, basically, with the exception, I think, of Tesla Motors, run most of them into the ground. And even that, at this point, is not looking great compared to what it once did. And that's largely because, the guy, instead of focusing his energy on running his companies, is focusing his energy on being thought of as this big celebrity. And of course, that galvanizes people, where some people love him, some people absolutely despise him. And, if you're a CEO, you really, the opinion you want most Americans to have of you should be that they don't even know who the fuck you are. You should be all about successfully advancing your business. And, you know, his celebrity status makes that a lot harder to do, especially as he makes decision after decision that just don't make sense to ordinary people, especially as he takes one of the most famous premier social media platforms that is, you know, a major hub of discourse and discussion, and just makes decisions about the running of that social media platform that are just so unpopular and so imbecilic that the users of said platform hate his guts unless they're fanboys. So he's got some fanboys that think like, wow, these decisions are so great, but the majority of users think the decisions are terrible. And, you know, they've seen major declines in their, you know, user base because of it. Now, true, I mean, as bad as Elon Musk has been running Twitter, you would think that there would be a bigger decline than what you see. It hasn't been as dramatic as you would think. I think I said at one point that it was like 20% down, but I think it's actually more like 5% down. But here's the thing. While it's 5% down, every other major social media platform has seen growth. So you can't just look at it as, you know, everything else is stable and his is going down. It's everything else is going up and his is going down. So, you know, those kind of numbers are not gonna be super conducive for Elon in the long run. And the point of all this is, and I don't mean to go off on a weird Elon Musk tangent, is that we don't live in a meritocracy. You know, we are not living in a society where people who are poor are to blame for their poverty and people who are rich are to be credited with their wealth. For the most part, people who are poor are being held back by an unfair system, and people who are rich are being propped up by the same unfair system. That system, by the way, is called capitalism.
Then everything makes sense.
To me, if anyone wants to go to Gaza or understand the fundamentals of Hamas, especially if you're a woman, why would you subscribe and defend that? If you've seen the video of the carnage October 7th.
Because no one defends Hamas. I don't know if you understand this. It's really not that hard to grasp. But if you see a bunch of people being bombed and massacred by a country that your country is arming, and you take issue with that, that doesn't mean you ideologically agree with the people being massacred. Like, agreement with another person is not a prerequisite for me not wanting that person to be murdered, especially not on my behalf with my money, right? I'm not interested in that. I would much rather that person not be killed, even if that person is a radical fundamentalist Islamist who is anti-gay, anti-trans, whatever. Even if that person, by most political metrics, according to my worldview, is horrible, I still don't want them to be massacred and butchered by a massive bombing campaign. That's not something that really interests me. So I don't know. I mean, I think this weird idea that me not wanting people killed means that I must support them ideologically is a very strange notion indeed.
How could you defend that? And to me, it just shows an ignorance, a willful ignorance among the next generation who are eventually going to be our leaders. What will it take to sober them up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think stunning ignorance is a great way to say it. What I think your average American needs to understand is that in this oppressor and oppressed narrative, the biggest oppressor is Western civilization, America, and Christianity. So anything you have to...
I mean, you know, here's this, like, the case where you have to say, like, well, if the glove fits, man. Like, you can't just say, I don't like the narrative because it comes to conclusions that I don't like. You actually have to make a counter argument against that. If your only counter argument is that, you know, a lot of progressives are anti-American, well, that's all well and good, but you can't just say, like, well, I'm pro-American, so I don't agree, so therefore they're wrong, which seems to be the argument here. It's just, they're anti-American, I'm pro-American, everyone needs to be pro-American for vague reasons, therefore progressives are idiots, I guess. But you're not actually arguing for America. You're not actually arguing against the reasons that progressives might lay out as to why America bad. And, you know, as far as my personal opinion on the whole America bad thing, I think America is good in many ways, and it's bad in many ways. Just like most people are both good and bad, most countries have pros and cons. And when you're talking about a country that is a global superpower like the United States of America, that tends to amplify the cons and, to be fair, the pros. Like, America gives many countries around the globe a ton of foreign aid, and that's good. I think it's great that, you know, we are contributing positively to so many other countries, that we're so giving and so charitable and all this. I think it's great that America still somewhat values freedom of speech. I think it's great that people of different political ideologies are not yet thrown in prison simply for having different political ideologies. Now, I think that freedom of speech is constantly under threat. It seems to be under massive threat, I think, particularly from the right wing. But I mean, there's definitely some left-wing threats to freedom of speech as well. At the end of the day, there are some good things about America, and I'm not going to deny it. And, you know, my favorite thing about America is not really any sort of policy thing. My favorite thing about America is our attitude. We have a real fuck you attitude in this country. We have a real kind of scumfucky degenerate attitude in this country that I personally enjoy. You know, the fact that there are so many Americans out there that are just all about you know, selfishness and, you know, carnal pleasure and gluttony and all these things that we pretend like we're not about, but we really totally are. I think it's kind of cool about us. I think, though, that you need to balance that out. You know, there's also, I think, a great deal of charity and compassion and all that stuff in Americans. But at the end of the day, I don't think that our selfishness is our biggest flaw. I think it's actually pretty cool. I don't think that our charitability is our biggest virtue. I actually think that it's, you know, it's pretty cool too, but it's not my favorite thing about us. But I do think it's there. But as far as the things that are bad about America go, our foreign interventionism, our proxy wars, our, hey, let's fund this, you know, terrorist organization and call them freedom fighters because they're going to fight against the other army that's being funded by Russia or China. So, you know, doing proxy wars where China or Russia arm one side and we're arming the other, I think is pretty lame. I think that us overthrowing democracies in other countries is pretty lame because so that we can install like puppet governments that, you know, behave in ways that are, you know, conducive to our political desires. You know, basically, America is sometimes called the world police, but we're really not trying to police the world. We're really just trying to advance our own geopolitical interests in all things, even when it means depriving the citizens of other countries of freedom. It's like we value our own personal freedom, but then when it comes to the freedom of someone else who lives, especially in a developing country, a third world country, the global south, whatever you want to call it, it seems like we really don't place much value at all on their freedom, or as demonstrated by how, you know, both political parties in our country, you know, are anti-ceasefire in this Israel-Palestine conflict. It seems like we really don't care much about the actual lives of human beings in these developing countries either. So I think that's a sad state of affairs, and I think that there are tons of extraordinarily valid criticisms you can make of America, even if you go beyond our foreign policy. Like, our business policy in this country is completely unfair to the working class. Our military industrial complex, the amount of tax dollars that could be spent to benefit, you know, people in society, being instead spent on developing weapons that are useless. weapons that really aren't designed to be useless, that are just an excuse to funnel tax money to private corporations that we don't hold accountable for their problems or their errors. You know, it's like, hey, let's just give these giant companies endless amounts of money to develop, you know, tanks and jets that don't work and, you know, still don't work after years and years in development and are a complete disaster, you know, but you know, they're not even designed to work. The point of them is not that they work. The point of them is that they're funneling tax dollars to private military companies that, you know, can then funnel that money in turn to politicians who then, you know, make more policies that benefit the ultra wealthy. So really, we live in a country that's engaging in class warfare where money is taken from us via taxation, and then instead of being used for social benefits or a social safety net or anything like that, it's instead all being funneled to you know, giant corporations that are being subsidized. You know, there's the military industrial complex. There's all sorts of industrial complexes that are not as famous and well known, but still nonetheless a huge issue. I mean, look at the amount of subsidies and tax breaks that we give some of these giant corporations in this country. And pretty much every time we pass a bill these days, especially these bipartisan bills like the Biden infrastructure bill, giant handout to corporations. You look at how that money was actually spent, it's a giant handout to corporate America. You look at how, you know, look at Obamacare, giant handout to corporate America. And then you look at something like the only major accomplishment of the Trump administration was his tax cuts for the rich. They tax cuts for everybody, but they expire for the middle class and they are perpetual for the rich, right? So really, this country is engaged in a state of class warfare against the 99%. And in fact, in some ways, against the 99.9%.
To do to fight those three things is going to be considered virtuous. And so any activity you do, no matter how immoral it is, you're going to get the cheer for it. So that's why I wrote the book. The only place you can get the book is my website, johnlcooper.com. I want to make sure.
So this thing, even so you can only buy this book on his website. No major retailer even wants to carry this book, I guess.
Say that. I want to speak out about it because the principles of liberty are so amazing. And I truly believe people have no idea how precious this country is.
I mean, if the principles of liberty are so amazing, then why are you so against the principles of people protesting against what the Israelis are doing? Like, if you're like a true principles of liberty kind of guy, then even if you think that those people who are protesting against Israel are wrong, you would still think like, wow, though. I mean, it's so important that they're doing that because it's so important that we live in a country where people have the freedom to do that. Like, that would be the take, right? It wouldn't be, man, this country is going to hell in a handbasket because these people are daring to have a different opinion than me.
Yeah, and you care so much. You travel with your band. You care about the country. You read every moment you can at the...
Yeah. What are you his biographer? Is this true? This guy is really sitting around every day reading every spare moment. He's reading something. Is that what's going on here?
Same time, you're a fantastic musician with a wonderful following, but...
Okay, yep. Suck his cock a little harder, bud.
You care most about the country, and that's why you did the book. John, thank you so much. John Cooper, appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. That concludes our 3-minute little interview with the lamest rock star on the face of the earth. Good for us. Amen.